Hello and welcome to the Daily Racing Form webinar about using trainer stats in your handicapping. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, back with you alongside a special crew of handicappers who are going to tell us how they each use Formulator to help them pick winners. They each have slightly different approaches. I can guarantee you over the course of the next hour you're going to learn something pretty cool when it comes to Formulator. Before I introduce our panel, I just want to let folks know that you can ask questions at any time during this webinar. There's a little tool that you can see there within the software, and you can submit a question. We'll either answer your questions as they come up, or perhaps we'll set aside a little bit of time at the end of the show today. I mentioned we have a group of special guests. We're going to start off with somebody who's never been on one of these webinars before. You may know him from the Horse Players television show, from the fine work he did on the simulcast program at Kentucky Downs, the work he does handicapping for Saratoga Bets. He is the Brooklyn Cowboy, Kevin Cox. Kevin, how are you today?
Very good. I'm just amazed I got it this far on the computer.
It's interesting that someone who uses Formulator so much doesn't seem like 100% comfortable with all the aspects of computer technology. I guess that speaks to the fact that Formulator is not too difficult to use. Would you say that's right, Kevin?
Well, I guess once you get the training wheels off, anything is easy.
I like the sound of that. We're also joined by the founder of publichandicapper.com. He is a frequent guest on the DRF Players podcast. That reminds me, we're probably overdue for a visit in that forum coming up pretty soon. He was also the winner of the Battle of Saratoga this year, the second day of the two-day contest. I'm talking, of course, about Scott Carson. Scott, how are you?
I'm great, Pete. Thanks for having me.
And then no flowery intro for DRF podcast co-host and director of product marketing, Mike Hogan. He's the stalwart of these webinars, puts the shows together, does a great job producing them. What's up, Mike?
I'm just excited for this one. I love talking about how different people use these stats because obviously, many people know that I use them for writing bet this, not that, and things like that. But I haven't really had an open roundtable discussion with different horse players about how they approach the trainer stats. So I'm excited today.
That's exactly what we're going to be doing here today. I want to start off with a general question for Kevin. Kevin, when he joined me at Saratoga for the Horse Players cast reunion that we did on Travers Day, I thought gave an excellent little dissertation on his handicapping process and at what stage in that process he likes to bring Formulator in. Kevin, I'm going to ask you to explain that to the folks joining us here for the webinar today, that your process of separating contenders with Formulator.
Well, like I said at the seminar up in Saratoga, Formulator is not all a person should use. It should be an addendum to what you already know. Whether your knowledge is horse flesh, visibly looking at horses in the paddock, or to a lesser degree on television, or the figs, whether it's the Ragazins or the sheets, or like I use the Buyer speed figures. What I'll do is I'll take, let's say, a field of 14, and I'll readjust the Buyer figures as I see fit. I usually go back 3 races, which is what you have to do if you want to get some value. And I try to whittle down. Just imagine you have a piece of wood and you're shaping something out of it. I try to whittle it down into maybe 5 or 6. And then once I get to those 5 or 6, then I'll dive into Formulator. You'll go absolutely crazy if you try to do it for every horse in every race. It's just not, it's not worthwhile. What you have to do is trust yourself. If you're good at figures but you need a little something more to push you over the edge, or maybe to find a stat that nobody else or the common public is not seeing, then Formulator is the way to go.
Mike, how does that dovetail with the way you use Formulator?
Well, I think when Kevin's talking about specifically the trainer stat section of Formulator, which is of course what we'll be diving into for this webinar, but in general, when you handicap, you're looking at a Formulator screen, right? Well, you're looking at your PPs with the race replays and everything like that, right? Right, Kevin?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I dive right into the trainer stats, predominantly the trainer stats, because if you dive into the owners or the jockey stats, it's really not relevant. Right. And with the trainer stats, you can really go a myriad of ways, which we'll get into a little bit later as I guess how I go about it.
Right.
Some people refer. You go ahead, Mike.
Oh, sorry. I was going to answer the question that you posed about how I use them. I approach it very similar to how Kevin does. I do my handicapping of the race with other factors: class, speed, just pace. I look at it from the standpoint of how the horses are coming into the race, what I see on paper, what I see in race replays, and then I'll use trainer stats to answer a question, and I'll use some examples a little later, but I always have a question whenever I dive into the trainer stats. Why is the trainer putting blinkers on? Why is he changing surfaces or distances or that sort of thing? And a lot of times the trainer's patterns and tendencies can give a hint to their intent with the upcoming race.
The classic, what you might call fundamental factors of handicapping: speed, class, pace, and form. But in the modern game, a lot of people believe there should be a fifth major factor, and that major factor is trainer. Scott, I know for you, a lot of the work that you do with Formulator, yes, it helps you analyze specific races, but I feel like from other conversations we've had, you're also educating yourself about trainers. A little bit later in the show, we're going to show some specific examples of how you learn about trainers through Formulator. But I was just curious to ask you in a more general way how important Formulator and the trainer tool specifically are to just your understanding of racing as a whole.
Well, I would actually really agree with Kevin, who, by the way, we've never actually formally met. So nice to meet you, Kevin. And maybe he can't hear me, but anyway, I agree with him that whatever your angle is, and Mike as well, whatever your angles are, when you zero in on a few horses that you're interested in, and then you go into the trainer pattern, and you see that for some reason the trainer from 31 to 60-day layoff hits at 4%, and you're like, so many times I still bet it because I like the horse, and it's the Formulator trainer stat that should have stopped me from wasting my money on the horse. So I've kind of learned that I have to check with Formulator to back up my opinion no matter what. I mean, it also gets, it also will bring forward live long shots, but at the same time, it'll also put the kibosh on a horse that I like for whatever other reason.
Scott makes a great point. Money saved, if you play the horses a lot, especially, money saved is really the same thing as money earned. So when you can find a situation where there's a negative stat that's going to keep you off of making a bet, or maybe point you to a certain pool where you can then attack all of a sudden with the odds in your favor, because you know something that not everybody in the public does about a negative factor about a favorite, say, these are all things that are going to help you big time in your horse playing. Let's dive into some specifics, and I want to start off with a race at Santa Anita on Friday. We're going to take a look at race 6 at Santa Anita. I know, Mike, you had a few things you wanted to point out about this race. I don't know if the other guys looked at it, but that's okay. Just curious to get their we'll follow up with your example with some general thoughts from them on this process and how they can relate to it. So take it away, Mike.
Absolutely. So yeah, Santa Anita opening day. You'll see. I'm gonna note something that maybe you guys have noticed in using Formulator. But anytime you click on a race card, be it in Formulator or in Classic, we're clicking on Friday's races. Of course, we're looking at Santa Anita. But if we were looking at Belmont for Friday, you'd see the same thing. Anything you see up here in your Formulator PPs, those are free PPs that you have access to for other tracks. So any track tomorrow you're handicapping, you get the free late pick 4 PPs for Santa Anita opening day. Just wanted to note that to people. I think a lot of people don't even realize that.
That's a great point, and nice to be able to get that extra little bit of information and participate at the start of one of the big meets of the fall. Always nice to get stuck into the great race place, especially this year when we're going to have the Breeders' Cup out there in just a few weeks' time. Might as well get a jump on your Santa Anita, getting familiar with everything going on. They've got the new turf course. Be interesting to see how that's going to affect things, etc. So let's talk about the Eddie D, Mike. What did you see in here that interested you?
Well, there's a few things. Of course, this is a big prep for the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, which is going to be at Santa Anita again this year. Lady Shipman, of course, a filly facing the boys, has drawn the rail for trainer Kieran McLaughlin. And if you scroll through the field, you'll see that not only is this an oversubscribed field to the point that you've got, I think in this division, you've got one also eligible, two also eligibles. But they got so many horses entered that they had to split it into two divisions. So race 9, I believe, tomorrow at Santa Anita is also the second division of the Eddie D. So you get two down-the-hill stakes race, grade 3 stakes races on the same card, which is pretty cool. One of the things that I like to look at for races like this is, especially down the hill, is affinity for winning specifically at the hill. And there's a few things we can do. Scott, you mentioned the ones about saving money. I'm going to show some stats on Kieran McLaughlin. You click on any of the trainers' names and you get, of course, the default of all the runners that they've had in the last 5 years in all races in North America, and including even in Dubai, which shows up in the database as well. You click Modify Filters. That's where you get all of the fantastic information that you can do for Formulator. And you see in graded stakes, Kieran is 16%, 112 ROI. So the ROI drops a little and the win rate drops a little, but of course that's not surprising because graded stakes are often harder to win. One of the things I did is I sorted by official finish, which is how I like to view it. And the way I work at it is I layer on from there. So we want to see how Kieran does in graded stakes. The interesting thing for me is Kieran is not based in California. He's based in New York and in Florida over the winter. So I like to see, in a case like a trainer that's shipping out to a circuit that he doesn't normally run at, how they do in that circuit. So we do include circuit list, and I'm going to remove graded stakes. I'm just going to look at all Kieran runners in Southern California in the last 5 years. He's over 14. Of course, all of those are graded stakes. He's only shipped out for basically the Malibu and the Brea and a few others, and then the Breeders' Cup. So not really a surprise, and it's not really a huge knock to me that he's not winning the graded stakes at California, because those are tough. But what I do is I'm going to add in graded stakes again, and I'm going to add in all of the circuits outside of Florida or New York, which is where Kieran is based. We already have Southern California in there. So we click that. You'll see he's just 2 for 66 with only 23% in the money in any graded stakes anywhere in North America outside of New York or Florida. This tells me that this is something, if you scroll through, and maybe I'll sort by odds, you'll see a lot of short prices not winning races in graded stakes when they were expected to. I'm not saying that means Lady Shipman is absolutely a stone cold toss. It just means if you think she's the best horse in the race, which she may very well be, and if you think she's a stone single, stats like this make me take pause and maybe make me even try and attack a favorite that I know is going to be overbet.
Mike and Scott have both made this point now about using Formulator to be against a horse. Kevin, is that something that factors into your handicapping and the way you use the trainer tool as well?
Well, one of the benefits of my column is usually maybe an average of a horse a day, or maybe 2 horses every 3 days. I'll throw in a beatable favorite. And it's become a very popular part of the column because I feel the most important aspect of handicapping is not picking winners but picking losers. If you could do something the average person is not doing, you're ahead of the game, and most people are trying to pick the winner. If you could pick some toss-outs, some losers, like take a stand against Lady Shipman here, then you're ahead of all those people who are solely worried about choosing the winners, especially if these horses are low odds. And one thing I like about Formulator, aside from what Mike just showed, and folks have to keep in mind, there's an expression called winning off the plane. Some trainers can do it, and some trainers can't. Some trainers train their horses in such a way that the horse needs to become acclimated to the environment, and shipping across country just isn't for particular types of barns. And what Mike showed definitely indicates that. But another thing I like is, like, Lady Shipman has 19 starts, and I'm a big believer in how horses run from certain post positions, from the rail or from the outside. Some horses like to run well covered up, and some horses like to run well when they're in the clear. And I just saw what Mike had glanced. I think Lady Shipman has only broken from the rail once and ran off the board from what I saw on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, especially, and now she's doing something a little trickier. She's making a turn down there. She's coming down the hill. She's making a turn. And sometimes that's a very simple factor that you can have with Formulator is you could scroll back if a horse has 33 lifetime starts, and you can see how this horse does in a grouping of races, breaking from the 1, 2, or 3 posts, or breaking from the outside. Just little simple things like that that take about 10 seconds to find when you're using a Formulator.
And maybe throw in the idea that the sort of stereotype of the downhill course is that the inside posts don't do that well. I've seen some studies that theoretically disprove that, but I've also noticed that it does seem to be a little bit more of a negative, the inside on the downhill, in a big full field like this one, a little bit trickier to work out that trip perhaps. Lady Shipman, with her abundant talent, absolutely has a chance to buck that trend with the tactical speed that she has. I'm not saying she's a toss either, but certainly all this chatter is making me think twice before wanting to lump on at short odds, especially when the real goal is just a few weeks away. Scott, I want to get into the specifics of how you look at a race. Why don't we let Scott take control of the screen here and move a bit along to some Saturday races at Belmont. And Scott, I'll let you pick where on the card you want to begin with. I know you had several thoughts as to how you might want to tackle. I mean, unless you want to start off with the end of the card and show people those trainer profiles we were talking about.
Well, I think I want to go over, just because I did the research on the last race at Belmont on Saturday, the 11th race, which is a maiden race, and it's the end of the Pick 5, which is a very popular bet in New York. I don't know what the handle is. I don't know if it's huge, but everybody's talking about it.
And big. It's been very impressive out of the gate. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we've been waiting for the Pick 5 at the end of the card for a long time at Belmont, and they finally gave it to us. And you know, the thing about the Pick 5 is you're almost always going to have a maiden race in there, and that's where I use trainer stats the most. So looking at the 11th right here, and I'm assuming you guys can see my screen now.
Looks great.
Yep.
I also want to point out to folks, we have whole other webinars about how one can customize Formulator. We're not going to go into too much of that today. You can find an example of those webinars at drf.com/YouTube. But Scott is showing us his screen with the workouts, not in the traditional way. This is they're integrated in the lines of the PPs, which definitely help tell a story about how a horse is coming up to a race, or in some cases here, coming into their first start. To continue, Scott.
Yeah, I can't even look at the regular PPs anymore, classic PPs, because I need the workouts in the running line. So here's a Linda. Okay, so this is a mile turf race for 2-year-olds. It's New York breds, and we have a variety of different kinds of horses here. Some first-time starters, some second, third, fourth, and so on. Let's just take a quick look at Linda Rice, who we know in general can find winners on the turf. So the turf, she hits at 16%, $1.46 ROI. She's also good at routes, right? And you can see the route. That's something we would find in the classic PPs. She's also a good first-time starter. It's only 12%, but she hits at $1.47 ROI, which is, you know, not bad. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. And first turf, she also does well, 17%, $1.73. Well, I'm going to use a trainer stat that is customized, which in this case is first-time turf start at a route. Okay, because you know she is really actually known. I mean, if you think about it, if you've been following her, she's known more for turf sprints. So how does she do first time at at a mile or longer, a turf route. So when I click on her name, I'm going to go into the trainer stats. And then I'm going to go into modify filters. And then I can do what Mike does, which is just select whatever I need right away. But I actually have saved profiles, and you can save these. I've had these for years and years. I only add to them every once in a while now because I've been using them for so many years. And I have a variety of different saved ones. So for example, like how does the trainer do at today's track? How does the trainer do with today's jock? In the classic PPs, it only goes back up to 2 years. But in Formulator, you're going back 5 years. So I like to see, like, maybe they haven't done much in the last year and a half, but they used to hit all the time. So that's why I have today's track and today's jock, which are like my two most popular saved patterns. I have a lot of stuff with first-time starters. First-time starters in general, first-time starter with the jock, first-time starter at the track with 2-year-olds and so on. And then I also have first-time starter turf. But beyond first-time starter turf, I have first-time starter, FTS, turf route. Okay? And so
that's for trainers to do, so definitely good to get a line on the ones who can have success with that situation as opposed to the typical ones, I would say, who often that's more of a get a workout race, and they need to have one or two before
right.
they
and understand that I'm just explaining this, and that's why it took so long, but normally I just go right to that, and then I select it and I can see. So I'm clicking OK now, and let's see what happens. It's oh my God, look at it. She's 1 for 27 first-time turf route. 1 for 27. So her win percent is 4%, and her ROI is a paltry 19 cents on a $2 bet. So we know that the Linda Rice horse is going to take some money. This is a horse I want to play against thanks to the trainer stats. And when I'm working with maidens, I have nothing else to go on but workouts and trainer stats, and even with workouts on turf races, we can't really trust them because they've often been working on dirt. So yeah, look at all these workouts. This horse has been working on dirt, and so we don't really have an idea of how well it can run on turf. The only thing we really have is trainer patterns, and in this case, she's a play against for me if she's going to be a low price, which I would expect a horse like this to be maybe 5 to 1.
Yeah, you could see when you showed that scroll down too, Scott, that a lot of these horses, yeah, some of them were big double-digit long shots who weren't expected to run well, but there were plenty in that exact odds range you're projecting Save the Tigers will be in, where they're between 5 and 10 to 1. You eliminate a couple of horses in that odds range, all of a sudden you're basically negating the effect of the takeout and giving yourself a chance to get the best of it. So that certainly seems like an excellent approach.
Right. I mean, I think no matter what the odds are, when you're looking at 1 for 27, and if we click and view by finish like Mike likes to do, which I also like to do, we'll see that okay, the only winner she had was a 8 to 5 favorite. And the others, okay, they're not a high price, and so maybe it won't be a high price. But here's one that was 190 to 1, right? 9 to 5, and it finished 8th. So this is a horse I'm not that interested in. Now we're doing this early. We don't have the morning line, but so everything is assumed based on morning line. Like if this horse is 20 to 1, maybe it's still a play because the mother won as a 2-year-old. The mother won on grass, right? But assuming that it's going to get played, this is a horse I'm going to watch.
The other thing notable I'll add, Scott, about that stat that you showed was, yeah, the one win and 2 others that hit the board. The 2 others that hit the board they both ran third, so only one in the exacta out of 27 in the last 5 years. And the 2 that ran third were beaten open lengths, I think 2 lengths and 4 lengths. So these were horses that weren't getting nosed out for victories at big prices. It's one that it shows me when she has a horse that she sees as being a turf router, she probably gives them a start or 2 before they show their best.
we've so far in this webinar talked a lot about negative angles on horses. Scott, do you have a positive angle in this race to share with us?
Yes, I actually have an angle on every horse, but I'm just going to go to one more here, and this is a positive one. It's on rule number 1. Okay, and I have no idea what the odds are going to be on this horse, except that he was 53-1 in his first race. So, and he finished 7th, 8 lengths back. Okay, so chances are this horse is still going to be a price. So let's go into Timothy Hills. Actually, sorry about that. Let me go back because I want to say, like, here's some reasons why you might dismiss this horse. Maiden second start, 6%, 282 ROI, which is pretty good.
Tip off there, but yeah, but you see it next to 0 for 19 and 6%. I mean, I'm following what you're saying here.
Right. So
53-1 in the first start, not super exciting.
That's right. So this is his second start. And he's going sprint to route. So I'm going to go into modify patterns here, and let's go into this pop out all profiles, so we can see all the profiles that I have. And here's one second start sprint to route. Okay, so I'm going to choose that. And hey, look at the second start sprint to route. He's 2 for 17 with an ROI of 4.14 on a $2 bet.
And another one that just missed by a neck too. So very close to being 3 for 17, right?
Right. And had a 9-1 there. So so he's going to hit. He hits with prices. Now the interesting thing is that this is not a profile that's saved with turf. I was looking at it and I changed it to turf and it saved it accidentally. So I'm going to save. I'm going to go back here and go to dirt. So he's actually only 2 for 18 on dirt, going sprinter out second career start, which is right here, second career start. So now what I want to do is I want to create a new profile, because going through today's race, I found a lot of horses that were going sprint to route on the turf, and I don't have a saved profile for that. I only have sprint to route in general. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into modify filters.
Yeah, we'd love to see how these profiles are made. I think that it's obvious how helpful they could be and how time-saving. So definitely, while you're still controlling the screenshot, Scott, show us how it's done.
Okay, and then I'm going to let it go. Okay, so let's hit Add Profile, the little plus here, and I'm going to say, okay, so second start, sprint to route, turf. Okay, and then all I have to do is specify here. Okay, so surface is turf, and under ranges, I can say, okay, second career start, and under distance, I can choose sprint to route. Okay, so that was under distance. I chose sprint to route, and then when I hit save, and OK.
Now that should appear right under that drop down.
Right, so you can see that we have the 2 for 17 record here, and here's our specifications: turf, second career start, and sprint to route. And if I go into modify filters now, and back to this pop-up, out all profiles, I now have second start right here, sprint to route, turf. So I like to have that so that I don't have to do it for every horse. Anytime I see a horse that's going second start, sprint to route on the turf, I'm good to go. And I have other ones, just second start, sprint to route. I have second dirt to turf, right? I've got one for everything. So you'll notice that most of my trainer patterns here are saved for first-time starters or second-time starters, because that's really what we have the most to be able to go on in dealing with horses that haven't run or have only run one time.
And the idea is that trainers are creatures of habit, not unlike horses are in a certain sense. They have certain moves that they're going to use again and again. They have certain skill sets that are going to be demonstrated again and again. The more you go through this exercise, at a certain point, you'll just start to have pet trainers and pet angles and know that Ian Wilkes horses don't necessarily run that well first time or second time, but you see them make a big jump up third time. There's dozens of things like that. By going through this exercise that Scott's been demonstrating, you can start learning this stuff yourself, and it eventually gets just integrated into your knowledge of the game and your understanding of the game. But the Formulator Trainer Tool is always going to be here to help you research unfamiliar trainers and also look for new information as well.
So Pete, we have a question from our buddy Elliot Honecker for Scott, and then I'll open it up to the rest of the group. He wants to know, is there a minimum sample size you need to see to feel more confident when using the trainer stats filter?
That's a great question. I don't have a minimum sample size because they vary so widely. But I would say that I want to see one win with that angle, or at least a second. If it's going to be a positive angle, I want either a win or a good second at double-digit odds in order for it to be statistically significant. So, like, if a horse, trainer is a first-time starter and he's 0 for 20 and no horse has been in the money, then I forget about any first-time starter by that trainer. But if he's 0 for 20 and he's got 2 seconds at 20-1, then I say, hey, you know what, maybe I'm going to include him. So I think in particular with the maidens in the pick 5, you want to include horses that have a chance at a price. And I just brought up this statistic right here. If you look in the regular PPs, the classic PPs, it says that Timothy Hills is 0 for 19 with 2-year-olds, okay? But that's going only back to the beginning of 2015. Has he always been like that, or is it just like a kind of a fluke? So I'm going to go with him back into his trainer pattern and modify the filters and say age, I'm going to go to 2-year-olds only, but this is going to be for the past 5 years, as you can see there. And when I look at that, I see, hey, for the last 5 years, he's got a 223 ROI, and he's winning at 11%. It just so happens that he hasn't hit with any 2-year-olds for the last year and 3/4. So to me, the 0 for 19 is statistically insignificant because historically he's actually done well. It's just he hasn't hit with a 2-year-old in the last 2 years. Now you can look at that negatively. The only way I would look at that negatively is if he was odds on, or 6 to 5 or 8 to 5. Then you say, okay, well, he hasn't done this in over 2 years, so that's the more statistically significant factor. Otherwise, here I'm assuming this horse is going to be a price, so I'm going to include him absolutely in the pick 5.
Kevin, how about you? What's your view on the importance of sample size when it comes to trainer statistics?
It's all relevant to how many parameters you're using to get to that sample size. For example, if you're just solely saying first time off the claim, you need a large sample size because that's a broad topic. But the more the categories you add to what you're coming up with, for example, first time off the claim, dirt, sprint, amount of days. If I can use up to eight different categories to come up with a stat. And if I see a 4 for 5 stat, like I'll show you later, that to me that's extremely strong because you're using 8 categories to get to that stat. People say, oh, how can you use it such a small sample size? It really isn't, because when you figure the amount, when you incorporate the amount of races within each of those 8 parameters you sample size, it's really a huge sample size if you're using 8 parameters. So it's all relevant to what you're using to get there. I do want to touch on what was brought up before in regards to odds in the sample size.
Yes.
When I started utilizing the formulator earlier in the year, I was doing good but not great. I just didn't feel like I could turn the hump. I had a couple of good meets. And a friend of mine, Mike Balf, from famous Balf's Corner up in Saratoga, says, Kevin, when you're writing your column, you're giving these trainer stats, but a lot of times it's not relevant to the realistic chances the horse has in the race. It's an apple and an orange. So let's say you have a horse who normally trains nickel platers, and he has great numbers, but the horse he's running is in a stakes race today. That's not really relevant. So that's why odds are extremely important. Now, I write my column 4 days in advance, sometimes 5. Sometimes the odds aren't there. But what I'll do, like in that sample size we just looked at, the 1 for 27, let's say that I'm assuming that Linda Rice horse will be, let's say, 10-1 morning line. What I'll do is I'll incorporate odds into that and go 5-1 to 15-1. You can make a low and a high, an odds range. That's within your formulator parameters. And that gives you a true barometer of the trainer's intent with horses that have that kind of a shot. If the horse is 2-1 morning line, I'll go 4-1 or less. That's one thing I learned, and that's really helped me turn the corner over the last 753 races. I have a 205 ROI over a bunch of different tracks because I made this minor adjustment. You see, out of a field of like 12 horses, there might be only 7 horses entered in the race where the trainer intends to win. Some of them are using it as preps. Some of them are trying to drop the horse to get a horse claimed. So what this does is it shows the intent for the type of horse entered in that particular race by the trainer. So whereas that 1 for 27 stat is a negative, I'm sure even if you broke it down to the odds that the horse is going to be, obviously if the horse won at 8-5, the horse is going to have, I'm going to guesstimate, an 0 for 15 or an 0 for 12 stat in that category, which is still pretty rotten because now you're adding another parameter, which makes that stat even stronger.
I think that's a good point about looking at trainer intent through the window of odds, and odds in general for me. It's such an important thing when it comes to sample size. I'll look at a sample size of 3 if it's a trainer I'm unfamiliar with, but they have a couple of horses who they don't even have to win if they're just hitting the board at with a certain angle at a big price. That could be enough. If you're trying to make macro judgments, as both guys are suggesting, about how a trainer does first off the claim, say, in turf racing with first-time starters, there you need a lot. But it's sort of sample size cuts both ways with trainer stats. In one sense, the more sample, the better. It's going to be more instructive. Looking at the 5 years of the Tim Hills is going to be more instructive than the 2 years. But sometimes it's that little tiny trend you can find only with a couple of runners. You're going to notice it before everybody else does, and that's going to mitigate the fact you can take what you might call a leap of faith in that instance. But Mike, I think we've talked enough about sample size. I think we should let you take the screen back, and we should look. Kevin, I think, did a little bit of foreshadowing there about a specific example he had with a small sample size stat. I believe it had to do with Saturday's Santa Anita card. Is that right, Kevin?
Yeah, the 6th race is good enough to look at.
Let's do it.
All right, Kevin. Oh, and actually here, before I do that, I'll show you that Saturday's card, if you click any card at Saturday, you get 4 different pick 4s for free. So if you're looking at Belmont for Saturday, you'll also get access to a Parks pick 4, Oak Tree Pleasanton, Santa Anita's late pick 4, and Gulfstream's pick 4 as well. So something
Mike,
to keep in mind.
I'm going to jump in there. You guys might want to throw like a little bubble that says free PPs with an arrow to the right, because I did not even know that.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. It's
there you go.
It's something worth highlighting.
Yeah. It's sort of the secret sauce that you have to know about, but once you know, you'll never miss it.
Like an Easter egg in a video game. All right, let's talk about this 6th race at Santa Anita, Kevin.
Who has the screen? Does Mike have it or I have it?
I've got it. I've got it, Kevin. So you talk and I'll
through.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously we have a bunch of decent babies. Most of them are routing for the first time, if not all of them, most of them. And while some of them have good numbers good proven numbers. A lot of them are going one turn. So what you want to look at is how the trainers are. This is very tough for a trainer, is stretching a baby out for the first time. It's a lot to ask because it actually incorporates some real training other than just putting the horse out on the track. We're going to go to the number of what will be the number 5, straight fire right there.
Okay.
Now people say, well, Kevin, how do you come up, how do you come up with what you put into your column? What do you use? Obviously, I'll use the surface, the distance, sometimes the class. Now, if you can't get a good sample size using class, you could incorporate odds because, like I said, it goes to the horse's caliber within that race. So now Straight Fire hasn't raced in 26 days. Obviously, you can't just say, I'm going to use horses off a 26-day layoff. What I like to do is I like to go up and down 1/3. So 26 days, a third of that is 9. I'll go 17 to 35 days to start. 1/3 lower and 1/3 higher. That gives me a good grouping of races. And the one good thing about Formulator is it's just, if that's not enough of a sample size, you can go 50% and go 50% lower and 50% higher.
So Kevin, what you're talking about is in here under the ranges, you go to the user
right, yes.
minimum and maximum, right?
Exactly.
So 17 to 35?
35.
Yep.
And now we're going to go distance. We're going to go first time route.
Okay.
And now we're going to go dirt.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to go. Now this is something I really started using a lot lately, and I'm really noticing that there's an in the money category. Before you click on, I want to explain. To me, when a horse finishes in the money, that means that the trainer was most likely really trying with the horse. And sometimes animals can regress off that. Sometimes if they finished out of the money, they could be gearing towards a race. And I feel the in the money category is very important because it shows how a trainer does maybe after a good performance. Now, if you want out of the money, basically you got to get a pencil and paper and just do the in the money and subtract it from the overall figures. But luckily for us, this horse finished in the money last time out, so we can click onto that.
Right. One thing I'll add too, Kevin, is he was sprinting, and if he finishes in the money last out, you got to ask yourself, why is the trainer stretching him out? Is he just stretching him out to try and get a check? Or is this really a sprinter who maybe doesn't want to go further, and the trainer hasn't had success with taking horses that run well and then making them run further? So I like it.
Right. So now we're going to go. I'm going to go trainer's intent, like how the horse really fits into the race. I'm assuming the horse is probably going to be about 2 to 1, with maybe 5 to 2, with the other one being the favorite. So let's go 8 to 1 or less in the odds department.
Okay, the odds are under ranges. Maybe we should I'll take a quick second to just show the time frame. We've kind of jumped a little further, but there's a lot of different features here when you're using Formulator. Class moves, trainer changes. This is where you find first off the claim, blinkers on or off, that sort of stuff. We're not going to hit on every one of them, but by all means, there's a lot of data in here that you can get access to, and encourage people to play around and come up with their own queries and saved profiles like Scott has. So what you're talking about, go ahead.
We'll go 0.1, which is 10 cents to the dollar, to 7.9 to 1, which is less than 8 to 1.
Right. Okay. So you, like me, there's some preset filters. I like to use the user minimum and maximums for both days between starts, for closing odds. I think and I'll even use it for, sometimes I want to see a user minimum and maximum. I want to see how a trainer does. If it's a 1.5 mile race, I want to see how he does 10 furlongs and up. So it's not always just the preset filters. That's another thing to keep in mind. All right, we're going to click OK. And there's your small sample size.
and you know, right now I'm looking at the piece of paper. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 very specific categories listed down. So when like some people say, oh, Kevin, what kind of sample size is that? When you're using 5 different categories, it's a pretty damn big sample size because you're incorporating a lot of starts into it. And you have a 4 for 5 stat, and look at the prices. $4, $6, $9, and $14.
Right.
So and what I like is it's done with different jockeys. There's nothing specific at different class levels. There's a starter in there. There's a claimer. There's maidens. There's 3 different tracks. So it's a stat that's versatile under different circumstances. And also you could just now this is where you use your common sense. Why is Sleepy off this horse? He's riding the other half of the DeSormo entry, who has no shot in the race whatsoever. So maybe the connections weren't happy that the horse ran a 22 flat middle quarter last time out. That's where you can add onto the stats you just came up with the human factor, with what you see in front of you. DeSormo off, Pratt can really ride. DeSormo can be, he's a very in and out rider, and to me, that's huge as well, which only adds to the fact. And if you look, Klimt, the favorite, really, the race set up perfectly for him last time. So I see an excellent shot with DeSormo stretching this horse at through the stats I've used.
Yeah, and sometimes I like to try and get trainer intent too by taking a look just at a high level. Okay, yeah, it's Keith Sormo. He usually likes to ride his brother Kent. How does he do with Pratt? You just take a look just straight off the no other filters. 3 for 7, 5 out of 7 in the money. Various odds. Tells me he's had success using this jockey, and so I don't see it as necessarily a downgrade that his brother's not riding.
And then just at first glance, you could say 3 for 7, but one of those races was 30 to 1. So you can eliminate that because the odds are going to be proportionally less today. So it's really like a 3 for 6 stat.
Right.
Now, these are great examples of how the trainer tool can just deepen your understanding of the game as you're going along. Kevin, I know you looked at a couple of other races at Santa Anita on Saturday. We've got about 10 minutes left in the show today. Maybe you can run over a minute or two. I want to bring Scott back for his thoughts on the Vosberg before we get out of here. But before we do that, I'd love to hear if you have another selection to give us or just another illustration of how you use the trainer tool from Santa Anita's stakes-laden Saturday card.
Yeah, let's keep it sexy for the audience and go to the California Chrome race, which will be the 7th race.
Love it.
And folks, when you look at that trainer stats, let's say you have a stat where the trainer is 25%. If that trainer is normally 25%, like a backward or something like that, then it's really not a wow factor. What I look for is a trainer stat that is 50% higher than his normal stat. So you'll never see me write in my column, trainer is 24% with such and such, unless they're 16% or less normally. They have to be at least, in my eyes, 50% above and beyond what they normally do in order for me to mention it.
That's very smart. That baseline of that Mike Hogan often refers to, it's not really telling you anything if the stat you're citing is the same as the baseline. But when it's significantly higher or lower, that's maybe when your antennae want to perk up.
That's like, let's say a college football team, they won their first game of the year their last 20 years. But let's say they're playing Toledo State or something. It's not relevant. It has to be more relevant than their normal numbers if they do something, like wild. So obviously, Chrome is strong here. It's the best, it's the best horse in the country. You can't say anything bad. Maybe you say, third off the layoff. How's it? There's nothing really bad. But I'm going to take a quick glance at opportunity here, which would be, I guess, the 3-horse.
One of Matt Bernier's favorite horses of all time, your castmate on Horse Players, and of course launched the DRF Players podcast with Mike and I several years ago.
Right. Now this horse, the horse is a nibbler by nature lately. If you look, I consider, layoff lines. Obviously, you like to wiggle them a little bit. I think the DRF has them at 45 days. Horse is second off the layoff today. One thing I like about the Formulator, especially when you're using the lifetime PPs, you can go as far back as you want. So in the middle of the page, between February and June, went from a 98 to a 99 buyer, lost by just a nose in a second off the layoff attempt. And if you scroll back farther than that, the horse went from an 84 while stepping up from an optional to a grade 1 in the clock, winning that race. And that's the one good thing. If you get the lifetime PPs, you can see these things. Once again, we'll say, how is it relevant to what backfoot does normally? So we'll go to backward stats here. We'll keep it simple, stupid, like I say to myself all the time. Second off, we're going to go second off the layoff, graded dirt routes.
Second after layoff, graded stakes is the class level, distance routes, and dirt.
And now we're going to go up to 9.9 to 1, so less than 10 to 1, because I figure opportunity probably go up about 8 to 1 or so.
So we'll do I'll do 0.5, so in case you had any 1 to 20 shots in there.
Oh, I never thought of that.
Up to 9 to 9. All right.
Now, 13 for 55, okay? It's nothing great. But now what we're going to do, see, it's his normal 24% win numbers. But we're going to go in the money. Now, I'm writing down 13 for 55. So now, hit the in the money category. That they finished in the money last time out.
You want in the money last out?
Yeah, even though he finished out of the money, we have to do in the money.
Right.
9 for 43.
Right.
So he was 13 for 53, but he's 9 for 43 within the money. So being this one finished out of the money, Baffert actually has a 4 for 10 win rate with all the categories I just listed, including out of the money. So maybe when you incorporate second off the layoff today, out of the money, what does that show the common player? Maybe he wasn't fully cranked for the last time out. Maybe gearing up for a better performance today. Enough to beat Chrome? No, but a damn good play for the exacta.
And I know, Baffert spoke before the Gold Cup about how he wasn't even going to run the horse. He was so unfit. Maybe then the second start. I mean, there's a lot of time between these races, but you can definitely construct a narrative where the fitness was building through the Pacific Classic, and now maybe is the day he'll fire his best shot and could once again be closing and be ready to get a minor award.
Yeah, and I get upset, like when trainers say, "Oh, I'm not even going to run the horse," and then he runs. Is that really fair to the public? He's not trying to pull a fast one because he's not looking to cash a ticket. But shame on anybody that bet that animal that race. Not after what he had said.
Yeah, it's tough. When you have a chance at what amounted to $1 million allowance race, I can't blame him for taking a shot, but I take your point too, Kevin.
Right.
Yeah, the other thing I like to note too, Kevin, is a little bit of trainer intent too, and trainer selection of races. With these horses that had finished out of the money in the race prior, when he keeps the faith and doesn't drop them out of graded stakes, they tend to perform well. So it's not like he continually is placing these horses who finished off the board in the prior start. It's not like he continues to place them over their heads. He's a trainer that knows how to spot his horses. He's a trainer that knows how to judge whether or not a horse is ready to run in a graded stakes. And so that's another thing that gives me added confidence when I see a stat like that.
And we don't have to do this today because we're running short on time, but you could also play fortune teller if you want and say, hey, Breeders' Cup is coming up. Baffert might be over the moon with a solid second. Maybe he only has the horse 85% cranked today and had the horse 50% cranked last time out. So if you wanted to, you could say, how is he with third off the layoff runners under the same parameters?
Right.
We don't have to go into that, but sometimes, the horse is really even much better. I mean, maybe he's really gearing towards the third off the layoff attempt. Right. I mean, you got it right there. See, you're clicking away. So he's actually 5% higher with third off the layoff runners than with the second off the layoff runners. So he improves. So now you have even a second sign that he's gearing towards possibly the Classic.
Right.
All right. Now, we only have a few minutes left. Scott, I did want to get your thoughts on the Vosberg. Rather than give you back the screen, I think Mike can just demo it if you talk him through.
Okay, sure. So I didn't have strong thoughts on the Vosberg. I found one interesting trainer stat. So if you go to the Vosberg and hit joking.
Joking. Okay, it's loading up. Joking.
Yeah. So without going into his trainer pattern, just take a look at this horse. He's his last race was.
Sorry.
I tried to get you to stop.
I know.
His last race was a 103 Beyer, and he's won his last 3 races. So pretty impressive. He beat Holy Boss. He beat Green Grotto. What's up with this horse? I'm not sure what his odds are going to be, but I suspect they're not going to be very good because he was, his last 3 races that he won, 5-1, 16-1, 9-1. Now he's coming off the layoff. So we want to know, if you scoot down a little bit, you'll see at the bottom his 61 to 180-day record, the trainer's layoff record. And he hits at 24% with a 172 ROI, which is pretty good. So then I would scroll back up and click on the trainer name.
See, Scott, when I say I always approach this with a question, my question for Charlie Baker is, how does he do with horses that have made 3 starts in a row where they've improved the Beyers in each of the starts? But that may or may not be what you wanted us to look at.
So what I found is first I went into range and did 61 to 180 days.
Okay.
And then I wanted to see how does he do off the layoff in graded stakes. So under class, do graded stakes.
Just a simple two.
That's all.
Two,
yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Let's just see how he did. And he's 0 for 2, but he has a 3rd and a 4th. So he hasn't run. This is talk about statistically significant. This is sort of an insignificant stat because he's only run in a couple of stakes, graded stakes, off that kind of layoff. So let's try non-graded stakes. So go back into modify and.
And this is one of the features I've asked them to do a all stakes combo on, which is hopefully coming at some point.
Now you look at that. Now we're talking. Okay, so 3
Right.
from 11. He's 6 for 11 in the exacta, and he shows a $2 ROI of 540. So that really impresses me, and I'm going to have to look at this race more closely. I didn't really want to beat AP Indian, but given that this horse's Beyers have been improving, and he's got this nice layoff stat, and if you go back to the regular PPs, and you also note that under his lifetime record under Belmont, he's 5 for 8 with 3 seconds.
Never out of the
exact 8 out of 8 times at Belmont. This horse is a horse I'm going to look at really closely as a potential horse to beat AP Indian, who's going to be the favorite.
Yeah, and a stat like that, look, it's not a trainer intent, and if you even go longer, Charlie Baker does great off of 180 days. I know that because there was a horse I liked at Saratoga that won a stakes race at 7 or 8 to 1 of his, returning from nearly a year. It's not like a trainer says, look, I'm going to lay a horse off for 9 months and then bring him back. It's more just, okay, if there's a potential issue, is this the sort of thing where we can rely on this trainer to bring them back at or near the same level and quality that we saw before they left, or have they proven that this is a trainer that needs a race off of a similar length of layoff? That's how I look at it a lot of the time.
Yeah, to me, the phrase I always use is, does the trainer have that club in their bag? The ability to win 2 turns on turf first time out. Some trainers have that club in their bag, some don't. They do the equivalent of laying up, giving the horse a prep, and then they make that move the next time. Long layoffs, it's the same thing. Some trainers have the ability to bring them back. It does often correspond, I would say, the ability to come back off a long layoff and the ability to win first out at any distance. So these are all ways that folks use, the folks on this panel use the trainer stats. I'm sure you out there listening have some of your own. Feel free to reach out to us. Keep the conversation going on Twitter. Let's do a quick round of Twitter handles, gentlemen, starting with you, Kevin.
I'm at Brooklyn Cowboy 1.
Scott?
Carsoni PH.
Mike?
At DRF Hogan, as well as at DRF Formulator.
and I'm at Looms Boldly. Mike, do we have time for one quick question from the crew, or do you think it's about time we wrap this up?
Well, you know what we have is we have a number of questions from the panel. What I might do is take it to Twitter and take screen caps and loop the folks in that I know. Some of them are Twitter followers that we have, like Ron Raschuti. I'll just take it to Twitter, and we'll continue the discussion there between you, Scott, Kevin, and me.
I love it. I look forward to getting to discuss these matters further and to having both these gentlemen back on either webinars or podcasts soon. I want to thank Kevin Cox. I want to thank Scott Carson. I want to thank producer, co-host Mike Hogan, and most of all to everybody for joining us today for the Daily Racing Form webinar on how to use the Formulator Trainer tool. You've been watching a webinar produced by DRF.com.